Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that I have a brand new masterclass coming out on the 18th of April. It's the 7 Steps to Podcasting. This was voted for by my social media audience. It won out against the other by a margin, so I will do both at some point, but the first one is going to be the 7 Steps to Podcasting. So if you want to come and join me for this masterclass, it's going to run for about an hour on the 18th at 4 p.m. UK time. So join me by hitting the link in the show notes or head over to donnaeade.com/7 podcast steps, all one word. That's donnaeade.com/7 podcast steps. Now back to the episode. Welcome to Mic Action Podcast. I'm your host, Donna Eade, serial podcaster and mentor, here to guide you through the world of podcasting. Let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I wanted to let you know that this is actually a repurposed episode. I've got a couple of these coming across this series. I'm definitely somebody who believes in not doing things twice and making life simple for yourself. So in this episode today, this is an episode that I did on my main podcast, the Mindset and Action podcast. So if you are an avid listener of that one, you may have heard this before, but it is so important to notice what podcasting can do for you. So I'm really excited to bring this episode to you. I wanted to let you know up front because the language might sound a little bit strange given we are on a podcast about podcasting. You'll hear what I mean when you listen to it. It might sound like, well, yeah, duh, obviously, Donna. But, I didn't want to fib to you and say that this was a brand new episode that had never been played before elsewhere. I will let you know what other ones are re-uploads as well. I want to be transparent with you guys. So let's jump into this episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here for this episode of the podcast because we are talking podcasting today. Podcasting is a fantastic way to market your business. So podcasting is growing and it is a underutilized tool, especially here in the UK. It is growing in the UK. It is obviously massive in the US. As most things are, they are bigger in the US than they are here in the UK. However, it is a really good way to market your business. And I wanted to give you a couple of stats before we dive into the episode, just so you can mull over this a little bit. Okay. So let me just click over here. So there are 464.7 million podcast listeners globally. So if your business has the ability to be a global business, then that is a number to definitely listen out for. Podcast listenership is set to almost double in 2024 compared to what it was in 2019. So it's looking at doubling. There are 3.02 million podcasts out there, but the important factor to hear in this is that only 500,000 of them are active. Okay, 500,000 active podcasts, 3.02 million in total. Now, the discrepancy there is people that have started podcasts and not continued to be consistent with it. It is people that put out serial podcasts so that it was only there for 10 episodes or 20 episodes or something. They did seasons. Active podcasts are any podcasts that have uploaded at least 2 episodes in a year. So it might be that somebody did their series and they only do one series a year and did 12 episodes, then there was a year gap, then this was where this was taken from. So that's why there might be some discrepancies, why you see such a big difference between the active and the number of podcasts there are actually out there. Now, another fact to consider is that the net worth of the podcasting industry is set to double by 2024 too. So there is money to be made in podcasting, whether that be to drive people to your own business, whether it is to have sponsorship deals on your podcast, and things like that. So there are alternatives and ways to make money with your podcast besides selling your own stuff. And to be in the top 50% of podcasts, you need to aim for 30 downloads an episode in the first 7 days. So that is not a huge number of requirements. So it's a really exciting time in podcasting because it is growing. It's set to double from 2019 by 2024. So there is a really good listenership for it, and there is a really good base to work from there. But what I wanted to do was, because I always talk about the top 3 for content creation, blogs, video, and podcasting. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a comparison there. So remembering those podcast figures, how many are active, how many there are in total. With YouTube, there are 51 million YouTube channels. 51 million. So that is 48 million more than podcasts. And there are 600 million blogs. 600 million blogs. Okay, so that is the competition you are dealing with there. Okay, so it is fascinating to see those numbers. Now, obviously, in your niche, in your industry, there are going to be less channels, less blogs, less podcasts, etc. But the fact is that podcasting, compared to the other two, is the new kid on the block. And the great thing about being the new kid on the block is that there is room for you. If you get in right now, you have the potential to build a really powerful marketing tool for yourself and your business, because it is only going to grow and get better. I absolutely love podcasting for that fact that there is still so much potential and untapped potential here in the UK for sure. So those are some of the stats that I just wanted to share with you. There is unique benefits of podcasting because you can create this personal connection with your audience, you provide valuable content, and you can foster that brand loyalty. Now, you can definitely do that with blogs and video as well, but I feel like people are wanting to have that connection more. I think it's really stemmed out of the pandemic and the fact that we were isolated for so long that we crave connection with people even more than we ever did before. So a blog is just reading something. You could pick up a book and read it. You could go on a website and read it. You could go on a website and read a blog. But hearing and seeing somebody just hits different. So for me, obviously, I chose to podcast because I didn't want to get myself, quote unquote, ready for video every time I needed to do something. But I love the podcast because literally, you could be sat on the toilet right now listening to me. You could. You could be in the shower. You could be driving your kids to school. You could be pottering about in your garden. You could be hoovering. You could be on a road trip. You could be going to a business event. You could be anywhere and you're listening to me. You've got my voice in your ear and we are having this quote unquote conversation. And I just love that. But you can't do that with blogs because you have to be sat still. You're not going to read a blog in the shower. That would be dangerous. You are not going to read a blog while you're driving. That too would be very dangerous. So a podcast can just reach you in different areas and over a video too. So a video, people aren't going to watch that while they're driving. They're not going to watch it while they're having a shower. They're not going to watch it while they're doing the hoovering or the gardening. They might listen, but a lot of the times videos are geared to being a visual element as well, so you don't get as much out of it. But a podcast is geared to just be listened to, which means that a podcast can take advantage of all that time that blogs and videos can't take advantage of. So that is another reason why I love podcasting. There is just something that hits different when you can hear somebody's voice. It just lends itself to not being more trustworthy, but feeling more like you're building that trust with somebody because they can hear you. It's that tonality in the voice. It's the personality that comes through. You can hear when I'm sad. You can hear when I'm happy. You can hear when I'm passionate. You can hear when I'm mad. You have that and you can experience that with me. And that helps to build that connection between us. And I love that. And you can have that with your audience too. You have this ability in a podcast to tell stories and to build that audience engagement. And I think it is just a great way to connect with your audience. Another great thing about having a podcast is this ability to build connections and network with people. So if you have a podcast like mine where you have guests on, I build my know, like, and trust factor with you guys because I bring guests on, because I say, look, I'm not the expert in this area. Let me bring on an expert to talk about it. And we have those conversations. I am then networking with my guests and having a connection with them and growing my audience through their network. And it's just this, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing how it happens. And there's also that ability for me to kind of give you a behind the scenes look at my business and what's going on in the industry. It's strange, but in a podcast, I will drop in personal anecdotes and stories that I would never have put into a blog, because a blog to me, I'm getting to the point. I'm just like listing off some stats, some bullet points and sharing this information, and I'm getting it out there. But when I'm podcasting, it feels much more conversational, and I will go off on a tangent, and I will often have to pause the podcast because I've completely lost where I am in my bullet points and my notes and stuff. So I have to stop and go, okay, what was I thinking there? Where was I going with that? And that happens a lot, but it means that you get more of the real me than what you would get in a blog, because a blog post, I feel, is much more curated. It's much more streamlined in that way, and it means that you just don't get as much personality through it, in my opinion. That's another great reason to have a podcast, is to just build that connection with people, because you get to be authentically you. Having a podcast can really help to position you and your business as a leader in your industry, whatever your niche is. By having a podcast and bringing in guests and sharing your knowledge, you're putting yourself in that position of authority, which can really help you with your own business, and it can help you with other things. So not just the podcasting, not just reaching out to your audience, but it gives you the potential to book speaker slots, to guest on other people's podcasts, to become this leader in your area because of the podcast that you have built and the audience that you have built for it. So you can then leverage that however you like. And a lot of people have done that. So, for example, Amy Porterfield, she has her podcast. It is like her main draw to get people on her email list. It is her main vehicle for communicating with her audience. And she does a fantastic job on that podcast. She has guests on and she connects with them, and she does things with them outside of the podcast realm. There are events that happen that she brings these people to, these events that she runs. She's guested on the events that those people have ran, and it just builds that authority. So a podcast can be a really valuable tool, not only for your marketing, but also for building your authority within your niche, which can impact how you show up in your industry and the things that you can get invited to and be asked to speak at. Another way that podcasting can help your business is by solidifying your branding. So we've spoken recently about brand voice and about brand identity and how you show up online. A podcast can really help to solidify that branding. You can show off your brand voice within your podcast. So for example, I always start the podcast and end the podcast in the same way. So when you see the show notes for the podcast, I also sign off bye for now, because that's how I sign off the podcast. So it's really important that you follow those vocal patterns through what it is that you're writing and where you're writing it, so that that creates that brand voice and identities. And the advantage of having a podcast or a video show is that you are constantly speaking with your brand voice. So your brand voice might be slightly different to you if you are not your personal brand. And I have thoughts about you as a person versus your business and how those two things intermingle. I'm not going to go into that today, but if you have a brand voice guide that talks about how your brand speaks, maybe you like to make 90s references, maybe you like to make movie references, maybe you like to make musical references within your business conversations, that is something that you can pull through into your podcast and vocalize it and give it an actual voice. Then when people read it in social media posts and in your stories, or see you in a live on social media, they are hearing the same thing, and that just solidifies your branding really, really well and makes it real to people. It like brings it alive for people. So that's a really great advantage of having a podcast as well. So by having a podcast, you can also amplify your reach and grow your audience. And I know that you can do this through other things, but like I said, there is just something different with a podcast and being able to hear somebody's voice, because you can hear the intentionality behind it. So in posts where people are trying to sell to you or get you on their list, it can often feel like it is just them trying to get your email address or just them trying to get your information or sell to you. But when you have a podcast and you can speak to it, then it comes across differently. They can hear your intention behind it. So recently in an episode, I was talking about the full focus planner that I'm using at the moment. And I said to everybody that if they went over to the show notes, there was a free weekly planner that they could use. And it was because I was talking about how planning is an important part of your day to keep you on track and to stop you losing time. Now, I didn't do that with I want your email address, here's a freebie. I didn't turn around and write on social media, do you want my free download? Give me your email address. It wasn't done like that. It was done genuinely, just as an aside to the fact that I said I'm using the full focus planner, but in all transparency, I didn't pay for it. What I used was my weekly planner that I created, which you can get by going to, and I left to the show notes, and I left it in the show notes for those people. So they can hear the intention behind it is not give me your email address. It's I've created something that you might find useful. And it came across as genuine and authentic, and it came across as me doing something for them. You know, it's just something that I've created. I shared it in a podcast months and months ago when I first did it, something that's been working for me that I was willing to share with you guys. And in sharing that with you, I hope that you would share your email with me and allow me to drop my podcast into your inbox every week. So it's a fair exchange, and it wasn't put forward as this is for exchange purposes. This is because it was useful in that moment with what I was talking about, and I thought it might be useful for somebody, so I mentioned it. So by putting that intention on it, you can really grow your audience because it comes across much more genuine, and it comes across with better intention sometimes than it can seem in text. And you can amplify your reach. So you can share your podcast all over the place, and you can get people to share your podcast all over the place, and people can listen, like I said, all over the place. So there is a bigger potential to reach your audience in a bigger way, in many more ways, because of the portability of a podcast. So the final thing that I wanted to mention before wrapping up this episode was the money opportunities when it comes to podcasting. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, podcasting is growing, and therefore the demand for podcast advertising is increasing. So if you have a particular audience that is primed for a particular product, then you are more likely to get somebody who wants to advertise with you for that product. And podcasters do it all the time. Just very much like how it works on YouTube, you can get sponsorship deals with different companies, and you can get ad spots with different companies. There are different platforms that you can look at to apply to advertise for somebody and get those advertising opportunities in. There is also the sponsorship opportunities. So I know that Amy Porterfield has a sponsorship type deal with HubSpot. Don't know the ins and outs of it, but she's always promoting it on her podcast, that HubSpot is a great CRM system, etc. There are different people on different platforms that share different advertising spots. I heard on Jenna Kutcher's podcast once when I was listening that she was advertising a coffee. So it all depends on your audience. It all depends on your downloads, but there is money opportunities there with those ads. But there is also opportunities there for you to do personally. So you can have paid subscriptions. So whether that is a podcast that you do specifically that people pay to hear, so you would have that. Or you can use sites like Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, where people can pay certain levels and get certain perks. So maybe you have a level where there is a bonus podcast episode every month that people who subscribe to your lowest tier get access to. Maybe there is a group that people who are paying the next tier get access to this group, and you go live in that group once a month and share something. Just something it's another way of making money with your podcast through your podcast audience. My thing is I am thinking of possibly doing a book club, because you know me, if you have been a long time follower of this podcast, you will know I have got a thing for interviewing authors. I absolutely love books, but my problem is that I don't make time to listen to my audibles, and I don't make time to sit down and read a book. So I would love to start a book club that will help me stay accountable for reading, because obviously you've got to read it within a certain amount of time, and have people read those books along with me and have conversations about those books. So if you are interested in joining a book club and being part of a book club with me, then do let me know on social. Come over to Donna_Eid_ on Instagram. Let me know in my DMs if you would be interested in a book club. I am totally thinking I really want to sort of add one to the podcast, and then I would talk about it on the podcast. I'd let you guys know what books we're reading, so you could join in virtually, as it were, and read the same books, but people who are part of the club would obviously get those conversations about the book as well, and that accountability. So I'm really excited about the potential of doing that. But you could do something similar to that. Have a little membership that is part of the podcast that you do something in that's relative to what you do. For example, if you are a health and wellness podcast, maybe you have a meditation membership, and once a month you get on Zoom and you do a meditation together, and between that you have a closed community that is private for members only, where you can discuss different health benefits of meditation, where you can discuss nutrition, exercise, and all of that jazz. You can have a little membership attached to your podcast that gives people a little bit more of you. So there is that potential there as well. And obviously the idea is to use your podcast to drive traffic to what it is that you are selling. So whether that is a course, whether it is a product, whether it is events, whatever it is that your business is about, should be shared on your podcast. And that is another way of increasing the revenue into your business. So we have spoken a lot about the benefits of podcasting today, and I hope that you are seeing the potential that is there with podcasting. It is a fantastic marketing tool that can reach your audience where they are at in whatever situation they are in. It is an amazing way of building your brand because people can hear you and hear your voice and understand the intentionality behind what you are saying. And it is a great way to increase your income through sponsorships, through leading people to your funnels to buy the stuff that you are selling. So if all that has convinced you that podcasting is the right path for you, I have got an upcoming web class that is going to help you to find out more, do more. It's going to be fantastic. I haven't finalized it yet as I'm recording this. I'm actually asking on social media for some input on it actually. So if you have inputted, thank you very much. But it is coming up. You can go over to donnaeade.com and you will find a pop-up there that will tell you, there will be a banner, there will be a button somewhere that's going to tell you about this upcoming web class. So if you want to get in on it, then go over there and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mike Action podcast and are enjoying the series so far. If you are, make sure to drop a review where you listen and share it with a friend. Until next time. If you're looking to build a deeper connection with your audience this year and you're a passionate business owner with a message to share, then I would love to help you do that via podcasting. If you're interested in starting a podcast this year, head over to donnaeade.com/apply to register your interest today. Don't forget to hit subscribe where you listen and rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. You can also share this episode with a friend. It is a great way to help the podcast out to get to more listeners just like you.